Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Before we get started with this morning's briefing, I think I should say from the outset that this is going to be a different conversation than the one that we normally have. I hesitated before deciding to jump into this one mainly because I don't like the kind of conversations that deal with people, particularly people who happen to put forward certain ideas. I want people to understand I am dealing with certain ideas. And of course, because there is no such thing as an idea that did not originate from a person, naturally people are going to be saying, well, what did this mean, so and so, what have you. Let's talk about the ideas, not the people. We hear very often about a strong black man this, strong black man that, but I want to make sure that we get it right, because if we don't understand what true strength is, then we wind up being weak. Black people in general and black men in specific need to focus on strength. A lot of us, even in places like this, have no idea what strength is. A lot of black folks, a lot of black men say that they do, but they don't. Strength at the group level normally manifests itself as leadership. But what is leadership? And what is the best way to perform it and carry it out? Well, first of all, leadership is not just one thing. Some people speak of it as if it's just this one thing, and it's not. It's a combination of elements. Character, intelligence, resources, ethics. Character comes first because it has to. Beware of anyone who tries to tell you that a black man doesn't need to put character first, because those people who say that are the exact same ones who, whenever they run into some bootlick or some other bottom feeder, the very first thing they're going to criticize them about will be character. Now, there are some who try to downplay the importance of character, especially if talking about gender relations. Now, it may seem clever or trendy for someone to try that because they seem like they're going against the grain, but they're also going against common sense, too. Character is crucial because everything stems from character. Intelligence is important because unless you have an inheritance coming or you hit the lottery, you're not getting resources without intelligence. You certainly won't be holding on to it without intelligence. The connection between resources and leadership is self-explanatory. In fact, it's the main thing that most of the new voices of black media talk about, especially over here in the B1 sphere. You're not winning any wars empty-handed. General Patton famously used his family fortune to help buy supplies for his army during World War II. But by the same token, you don't want to place an over-reliance on resources alone. And as for ethics, that's closely related to character, but mostly ethics has to do with your code of conduct. Now, I'm sure that everybody has their own unique take on this whole idea of the elements of leadership. This is not meant to be exhaustive. After all, we don't have that kind of time. My point, though, is no matter what many people may try to tell you, these things are not mutually exclusive. They can't be. Each trait relies on the other, builds on the other. Though there are a number of people who try to exalt one above the other, especially if they think it's going to benefit them. Men tend to lead with whatever they have a surplus of. Pookie and Ray Ray talk about their genitals because that's all they have to offer. Some black men brag on their degree or that little old middle management job they have, or maybe they came up on some money somehow. But we're talking about strength. And weakness is when black men over-index on whatever particular trait they think they have, one in particular, because a lot of them are one-trick ponies. A lot are faking till they make it. Now, obviously, complex truths cannot be distilled down to a single soundbite. I'm not arguing with that. But my point is, we need to be very careful about the ideas that we put out there and allow to proliferate. For a black man to advertise or otherwise brag on the money he claims to have, it's just like Pookie and Ray Ray bragging on their genitals. We recognize Pookie and Ray Ray as being weak because they brag on their crotch, and we all understand that to be vulgar and empty. Pookie and Ray Ray, however, observably have no intelligence, no resources, and no direction. The total losers like them are easy to spot. We all recognize that as weak. But what about the ones who are just as weak, but maybe a little less ignorant or might not be totally dependent on some girlfriend or who don't live in their mother's basement? They're not so easy to spot, but if you're on code, they'll stick out like sore thumbs, mostly because they're desperate to be noticed. Weak black men tend to be like that, driven by their insecurities. A few weeks ago, I told you about Hush Puppy, the former Nigerian Instagram influencer and current federal convict. He has something in common with this kind of weak black man. See, Hush Puppy spent a lot of his time, and I mean a lot, talking about Jesus and how God doesn't want him to be struggling, which is why he had so much money. But even his fellow Nigerians knew he was a large-scale thief. He exhibited every sin that Jesus preached against, all the while invoking the name of Christ and seemingly not able to see the contradiction in it. At least, that's how it seemed. But the facade would crack occasionally. There was a part of Hush Puppy's psychological makeup that knew he hadn't actually climbed out of Nigeria's endemic poverty. He was just another thief, and he knew that everyone who looked at him saw a thief. When he posted his conceited messages about how poor African kids in the slums of Nigeria could aspire to escape poverty just like he had, he left out the part about how he was robbing people. He was angry with the corrupt government of his country, yet he did nothing to change it. He fled. And once he had some money, he didn't try to fight for his homeland. Instead, he went on the internet and tried to be a celebrity. He got as far away from Nigeria as he could. But in his heart, he couldn't forget how the crooks and criminals of the Nigerian government drove him out of his own home, and how the only way he was able to live a lifestyle above dead poverty was to become a crook. He was no better than the Nigerian government, who takes the billions of dollars of oil wealth from Nigerian citizens and puts it in their offshore bank accounts. These kleptocrats in Lagos also have fancy cars and homes, just like Hush Puppy, and they also went on expensive getaways by robbing their own people. The only difference between Hush Puppy and the Nigerian government is Hush Puppy robbed complete strangers. Yet he tried to act like he was better than them, but what did he do differently? He posed with cars, he took selfies on a private jet, posted videos of himself in penthouse suites and wearing designer clothing. So in the end, he was just like the same Nigerian government thieves who he claimed to hate. And you know that ate him alive. He knew he was a moral fraud and a perverted hypocrite. He was desperate to feel like a good man, though. For all his empty boasting and bragging, he desperately wanted to find a way to live with himself. He knew what a moral contradiction he was. No, he knew what a moral failure he was. He was desperate to feel like he was decent. Worst of all, he knew that everyone else who looked at him could see right through him. So he made it a point to mention Jesus and God every chance he got. So, to overcompensate for his insecurity about how he got his money, even when his other criminal associates were being arrested, he didn't stop. Even when the police were closing in on him, he still didn't stop. That family is a prime example of a weak black man. Both the Nigerian scammer and the empty rhetorician are weak black men, mainly because they both try to valorize their behavior. Valorize means to enhance or to attempt to enhance the price, value, or status of something. You take something of low value and try to make it seem high value. Valorizing is almost always a lie. If something has value, you don't have to say it. People readily recognize it. On the other hand, if you're running game, well, you just might have to convince people you or what you're doing has value even when it doesn't. But aside from a lack of character, the prime trait of a weak black man is to not protect his own resources. That's just stupid. Anyone who argues with that is arguing with reality. It violates every tenet I've taught you. Black people in general and black men in specific are forever trying to reassure people that they're successful or pretty or confident or whatever. Weak black men go overboard with it, though, because in their hearts they know they're not fooling anyone. And we need to be honest about that. I taught you that your wallet is supposed to be a convent. Only the pure of heart are supposed to be able to get in, and that only after an extensive vetting process. Do you see nuns bragging about their convents? Black people are the only people silly enough to tell everyone exactly how much they're holding. Insecure black men do that. When's the last time Warren Buffett boasted about his money? In my video about Hush Puppy, I explained to you that the vast majority of billionaires are people you've never even heard of. Truth be told, you can only name a small number of billionaires, a handful at most. Richest people on the planet, thousands of them, thousands of the richest and most powerful people on the planet. And you can't even name more than a handful. See, true power doesn't advertise. True power doesn't flaunt. It doesn't have to. True power doesn't try to convince people of anything. Hush Puppy didn't understand that principle, and now he's in a cell, and it doesn't matter what he doesn't understand. You have someone whose insecurity and overcompensation for his own ignorance compelling him to have to prove that he's something he really isn't. That almost never ends well. There's a phrase I think black men should acquaint themselves with, six-figure simping. Or seven-figure simping in the case of some of these dating gurus, many of whom you've seen recently in the news. They're disgraced, exposed, discredited. It didn't have to happen, but their own insecurities and their own weakness that they wouldn't dare admit to made it inevitable. When it comes to relationships of any sort, especially serious ones, leading with your bank account is like telling a boxer to lead with his chin. That's the Tiger Woods school of personal interaction for you. You know, come to think of it, Tiger Woods does have a lot of money. Maybe we should be following him. Though I gotta wonder how that would turn out. Here's some good advice. Beware any black man who tells you that he's lost a couple of fortunes. That's a dead giveaway that you're dealing with a weak black man. To people who are easily impressed, saying that someone blew a few fortunes may sound good, but it's not. When a man says he's been rich and lost it all a few times, what he's saying is he doesn't learn from his mistakes. Even if he seems to have a few pennies in his pocket today, just wait a while. Before it's all over, he'll be right back where he started. Because the problem is him. I know this is going to make one or two weak black men who lurk around these parts very uncomfortable, but I'm going to drag you into manhood kicking and screaming because you got the game all backwards and we don't need others getting messed up too. When someone challenges a weak black man's insecurities, he'll snap and bite and snarl and lash out at them and try to shout them down because he hopes to discourage anyone else from seeing that the would-be emperor is wearing no Gucci. A black man who habitually yells and talks loudly is a weak black man. That is a black man who can't control his emotions. They're like these pulpit pimps, these pork chop preachers, yell all the time, and the only thing weaker than their sermons are their morals. They've got cars, they have women who they can lead with the congregation's money. Perhaps we should follow these preachers, right? Does that make any sense? For some, it probably would, though it would never make good sense. Another trait we see in weak black men is that they're habitually quarrelsome. Roly-Poly suffers from this malady. Tiffany Cross-Eyes isn't a black man, but she made it a point to start beefs for no reason. We can think of other examples like Mushmouth, aka Tone Teets, and of course the Fraud. Both of them thought that they would use beefing to raise their prominence and then parlay that into a job with some white media outlet, or with Byron Allen, which is basically the same thing, but it didn't work out for any of them. You want to know why the Fraud and Mushmouth never amounted to more than they did? Mainly because they made it a point to always be beefing with people. It's axiomatic. Black men who beef aren't builders, and black men who build don't beef. Weak black men are always getting into it with people who said nothing about them, but they look to start fights with total randos on the internet anyway. We've been seeing this going on for the better part of 15 years. This is self-destructive behavior, and we still see it today in places where we shouldn't. Beefing is one of those activities that creates more heat than light. You can burn down a house with it, but it's not going to lead you anywhere. Leadership doesn't brag. It doesn't have to. Any black man who must tell you he is successful is not successful, any more than a man who must say he is a king is a king. True success is secure within itself. It has nothing to prove. Success has no need to impress. In fact, successful people build walls to keep everyone else out. They don't want you to know what they have. Power is not inclusive. It's exclusive, especially with information about itself. Success, I'm talking about true success, acts very differently than insecurity. Insecurity tries to convince people it is successful because it's not really convinced itself. Success, on the other hand, doesn't care what you think and prefers to keep you in the dark. That's because knowledge will always rule over ignorance. Sun Tzu said that the best way to protect yourself from enemies is to have that which cannot be attacked. When someone is always talking about what they have, how much, and where it is, that's not secure at all. We see rappers doing it all the time, and most of them are broke. Their record labels got all of the money that they would have had. It's a story as old as the Bible. You got a black man who brags on himself and what he claims to have. That's a black man who's unstable and self-destructive. I don't care how smart he may try to seem. There's a cottage industry of black men desperately trying to seem like the smartest person in the room, from investment experts to dating gurus. We see them online all the time now. Many of them predictably wind up in a scandal or in handcuffs, and those are the lucky ones. A number of them wind up dead. Ever since the first snake oil salesman realized he could monetize people's desire to be successful, they realized that they didn't have to be successful themselves, they merely had to put up a front. A little jargon, a few slick words or phrases was usually all it took to get people to buy into the con. It's been going on in earnest since the 1980s. Today's success gurus are merely the digital age equivalents of the 1980s infomercial selevangelists. You look at a lot of these so-called influencers, especially the ones who claim to be giving investment advice, and you see they all do the same things. They have a video of themselves on a yacht that they rented, sitting in a huge house that they rented, and pulling up to a Gulfstream jet that they're renting for an hour, in a car that they're renting for a day, and then they have the nerve to tell you that you can be just like them, if you take their course. Seems everyone's pimping some course, usually about real estate or making money off the stock market, but the scam is the same. Give me some money and I'll tell you how to get rich. Doesn't take much imagination, though, to figure out that these gurus make their money off the courses they sell. A shocker, I know. Hell, this little influencer as financial advisor hustle, they're literally teenagers and early 20-somethings claiming that they can make you rich. It's a BS parade. They yell, God knows they yell. They point a lot, and for some people, this phony exuberance and insincere excitement is enough to get their money, but I hope that you'll be smarter. Recently, a lot of people have begun to examine Forbes magazine, especially their so-called 30 under 30 list. It's supposed to be a list of the most successful millennials out there. I guess this is Forbes' idea of reaching out to younger readers. What a lot of people have recently figured out, though, which should have been obvious a long time ago, is that a disproportionate number of the people on the Forbes 30 under 30 list wind up under indictment, under investigation, sued for fraud, etc., or in prison. This has become a consistent pattern with Forbes magazine, by the way. Their 30 under 30 ought to be renamed 30 doing 30 years. A lot of these young overachievers merely figured out the game of hustling these older venture capitalists, many of whom are not all that tech savvy, which is why so many of these 30 under 30 use technology as their particular hustle. And on top of that, a lot of VC individuals are simply looking for something to invest in. A lot of these companies started by these 20-somethings turn out to be shams and scams. They claim to have products that they didn't actually have, or sell client lists that didn't actually exist, or that they were offering products or services that they didn't truly have, and even if they didn't have any true value. This game is especially popular among the crypto bros, a number of whom do rug pulls, conning people out of millions, only to disappear without a trace immediately afterwards. A strong black man leads with his character. His resources are the result of his intelligence. But the true treasure is, this is a man of integrity. This is a man whose words and deeds occupy the same space. This is a man who's looking to build people up, not looking to BS them over. Weak black men, of course, make it a point to discount this fact because they're deficient in the character department. Pookie and Ray Ray lean on their bedroom prowess because that's all they have. That kind of weak black man tries to use his perceived success in the bedroom as his basis for leadership, because that's the only skill he's cultivated. He wants men to follow him because women do. That's totally backwards. That's not a leader. That's a Pied Piper. You're supposed to grow out of that kind of behavior in middle school, but sadly, a lot of us grow older, though never grow up. Some black people simply never learn to overcome their own insecurities. And the black man who talks about his W-2 as his basis for leadership will lean entirely on that until you mention somebody who has more money and ask, well, why shouldn't we follow them? Then it becomes a discussion about character, which is what it should have been from the very beginning. Take Suge Knight, for example. He had a lot of money, and now he has a lot of prison time. Should we follow him? Fox News and these white right-wing think tanks have a number of Negroes on their payroll who make six figures and more every year dogging out black people. I don't think that we should follow them no matter how much they make. As black men, we are the leaders of our community, but we won't be leading anyone anywhere if we ourselves are wrong. So let's forward a conversation that's actually rooted in reality, one that actually has the balance that truth requires. Run silent, run deep. The operative term there being silent. Lead with your head because money can't think, but act with your resources because that has the greatest impact. Don't brag, boast, or yell. Talk is cheap, but talking too much is expensive. Strength, true strength, Doesn't brag, doesn't boast, it's not loud, in fact, it's not even big or noisy, and it certainly isn't flashy. Strength is simply effective. Ignoring that reality is the weakest move of all. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Rebellious Zoe, Chaz, Sharif Dawson, Mark Anderson, and Ursula Howard. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.